read. They never tell me that they proud of me. Now they want to sit around with me. I'm still setting healthy boundaries. I don't even trust family. A lot of people look down on me. You ain't got a fake smile for me. I'm still setting healthy boundaries.
What's good, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. James Spitting Gang podcast, where real conversations meet lived experience, youth development, and the systems that shape our kids' lives. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies the intersection of elite youth sports, mentorship, and social impact. I'm honored to welcome Will Hailey. Will has coached at the highest levels of grassroots basketball, including serving as the Cal Sparks 17U EYBL head coach, where he led his team to a Nike Nationals championship in 2023. He currently serves as the head coach for Sports Academy 16U EYBL and continues to give back as an assistant coach at Sarah High School. But Will's impact doesn't stop on the court. Professionally, he works as a children's social worker, supporting runaway youth and young people impacted by commercial sexual exploitation. That dual perspective, coaching elite athletes while serving some of the most vulnerable youth in our communities, gives them a powerful and rare lens on development, discipline, trauma, and opportunity. Will is also a father of a son and two daughters. His daughters both competed at the Division I level, one at Washington State and the other at Grand Canyon University. So he brings firsthand experience as both a coach and a parent navigating the youth sports system. In this episode, we're diving into the role parents and coaches play in long-term athlete development, how structure and accountability can coexist with empathy, and what youth service systems, both sports and social services, must do better to truly protect and empower young people. So sit back, lock in, and tap into this conversation. This one is about growth, responsibility, and doing right by kids on and off the court. Let's get into it. Coach Will, what up, big bro?
What's going on, brother? How you doing?
All good.
Good,
And
good.
I really appreciate you coming on with me and helping me get these messages out to those that need it and to those that can help us with what we doing.
Appreciate you for having me, brother.
So first, I just want to ask, how did your background as a social worker shape the way you parented your daughters?
Um, it had a really profound effect in terms of shaping how I raised my kids. I had the luxury of starting my job as a children's social worker back in '92 before I even had any kids. So I started off in a program called Black Family Investment Project, which was sort of like a family preservation project, basically geared towards low income Black families, um, trying to provide resources to them. One of the things that I learned with Black family is that was the importance of resources and the lack thereof, and how families, especially our Black families, get caught up simply because they lack the resources. Um, and so, whether it's financial, family support, community support, jobs, um, childcare, transportation, things like that. You know, um, from then I did that for about 8 years. And actually, after that, I went to actually another program, which is you can consider it to be the opposite end of that spectrum of Black family. It was the sensitive cases, where I dealt with high profile cases, celebrities, um, certain professions. And so one of the things that I learned working with that population is that, you can have all the money in the world and access to the resources, but if you don't have relationships with your kids, it doesn't matter. Um, it was interesting. You know, a lot of those cases involved nannies having the best relationships with the kids because they're there and they're responsive, things like that. So that's one of the things that I learned from that population right now, and I did that for 8 years. Right now, I work with the runaway population, the C-sec population, commercially sexually exploited children. I've been doing that for the last 16, 17 years. So I've been a social worker for about 35 years, nearly 35 years now. Um, and one of the main things about that population is, kids want to be understood, not labeled. You know, um, learning to meet kids where they are rather than these expectations that you bring from home or your own background. Um, and so it really, it really shaped me profoundly in terms of learning how to, parent.
Yeah, that's deep. The relationships, that's big. I can't stress how important that is, not just with our own kids, but
Absolutely.
whether it's the teachers and the students in the classroom, coaches and their players. Because without those relationships, how do you actually individualize your approach with those kids?
Absolutely. Whatever and implement whatever your approach is, without the buy-in.
Right.
So definitely.
So, what challenges are unique to raising daughters in competitive sports environments?
Um, I would say one of the major things, injuries. Um, um, as you know, you had you coached your daughter, high level basketball player. Um, and one of the things that is really prevalent on the girls' side is, ACL injuries. Um, that was a big thing in terms of my youngest daughter. She suffered two ACL injuries. So that was a big thing as far as physical factors. But as far as beyond that, I think social stigmas. Um, you know, um, on the one end, you know, both my daughters being heterosexual, and having to uh, navigate and try to maintain their femininity. But even on the opposite end of that spectrum, one of the great things about our sport, that being girls basketball, women's basketball, is that it's always been a safe haven for the LGBTQ community. And so, um, it's vitally important uh, for us to maintain that space, for them to continue to exist and be safe in this space. Um, um, that's very important for me. Especially, and that's another. And ironically, it's another thing that I learned through the job as well, and running and dealing with the and working with the runaway population. Um, a significant amount of my clients are of the LGBT community. So um, that's the beautiful thing about our sport in terms of it being and continuing to be a safe haven for the LGBT community. Um, um, Social media, you know, um, um, is a big. I think it's a big challenge in terms of you know, um, not getting caught up in, you know, what, what has become, um, the trying to satisfy, folks that we don't even know, with posts and, things like that. And concerning ourselves with the number of likes, that we get, as far as, you know, um, posts and things like that. So I think that has been a challenge, that we've had to navigate.
Yeah, I started to go back to you about the injuries. In
Mhm.
fact, let me try to hurry up and say this. So it's funny you bring that up because, first of all, to all of the viewers, a lot of people that I'm going to be bringing on here are people that mentored me on one level or another. Last week, Coach Gary was on. He actually coached me in sports. But
Shout out to you,
Will,
brother.
yeah, but Will was my first mentor, whether he realized it or not, in his girls' basketball space. My daughter was a few years younger from both his daughters, and watching you and your daughters kept me motivated as a coach and as a you know teacher of the fundamentals and whatnot, and it kept my daughter motivated as a player from watching uh, Camille. I think she was about 3 years older, 4 years older, but just
Right,
watching her just being a straight dog on the court and just
right, right,
you know my daughter, we always watch whether it was high school, and then we started tuning in with college when they both was in high school.
mhm,
Sarah and you guys going to the big games on the big stages. That
right,
was
right.
fun, man. And I always watch and kind of like watch how you did things and just navigated through all of the drama that we all know in AAU sports.
Politics,
Uh,
most definitely.
yeah, but
Yep.
the injuries. So my daughter, she was blessed to only have one injury her freshman year in high school, which she tore her meniscus,
Right.
and that was in the state tournament. So we talking around what, March?
Yeah.
She was back
February, March.
100% by the summer. Like she didn't play AAU that year, but she was back ready to go.
Right.
She didn't have no more injuries, but unfortunately, she had this more of a so she had flat feet. So she always had a lot of pain in her feet. Always had to wear these special insoles in her shoes and everything. And by the time she got to high school, their trainer was really good. So the treatment was great, right? Then she get to D1 college basketball and the treatment was even better.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
She
Yeah.
went to
My
she went to Serbia to play pro, and it was zero treatment. So she was like, that's enough of this. So she
Right.
back. But
Okay.
then when you start talking about the social media, I think that's something that people have to pay attention to because before social media, parents always thought it was the highlights that you have to build in order to get a foot in the door to get
Right.
seen.
Right.
Then they
Right.
don't know there's certain highlights that get the attention,
Hmm.
but that's only the cover of the book.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm sure I'm gonna ask some more questions that that you can
Right.
shine on a little bit more of that.
Right. Indeed. Indeed.
But how did you balance advocacy for your children with letting them own their journey?
Um, Well, you know, ironically, my son is probably he was the guinea pig. Um, I actually started on the boy side with my
Gym
son, who's my
rats.
oldest. Right, exactly. The Inglewood Gym Rats, exactly. And so I got a lot of things wrong with him to get him right with my daughters. And so, you know, he taught me a lot in terms of, you know, because, you know, when we start off, you know, we always wanting the best for our kids, trying to position them. Um, um, to where they can, you know, play on the top team, you know, things like that, the superficial stuff. And so, you know, my son used to pull my coattail on that. Um, you know, he had, you know, one of the beautiful things about him is that he had a clear idea what he wanted sports in basketball, what he wanted it to do for him, and what he was trying to get out of it. Um, you know, I don't know if you remember back in the day before viewing periods or during viewing periods with college coaches, you would have to like your entire team would have to watch this film. Um, you know, that talks about the recruiting process and you know grades and eligibility and things like that and you know, he talked about the low percentage of you know high school players, you know, moving on to get scholarships. You know, he would, you know, whenever we would talk about those things, he would always remind me of those videos. You know, he took heed to those videos, and he was one that you know prepared long beyond basketball and you know high school and what life was and what he wanted life to look like for him. And so he sort of got me to a place where okay, you know, I need to treat this sort of like you know my kids having driver's permits. You know, I'm in that passenger seat, I'm there for them, but they're driving the vehicle. um, you know, um, where you and I grew up at in Inglewood. Um, you know, one of the things that was important for me is, you know, making sure my kids know, you know, life is tough. It ain't fair. Um, you know, things always happen on a daily basis. It's how you respond to it, your preparation for it is 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 the key, is the important part of that. You know, so you know, that went a long way in terms of, you know, the things that both of my daughters experienced as far as them going through this entire process, playing high level sports or high level basketball. You know, again, with my daughter, my youngest daughter, having to deal with multiple injuries. Ironically, about the feet, she had the feet issues as well. She actually just had surgery on one and has to have surgery on the other one soon. So she went through those, you know, the flat feet thing and you know things like that. And so, but for my older daughter, Kayla, I still to this day I believe that her class, the 2014 class, was one of the best classes as far as basketball was concerned. So her travel team, when she was playing for the Sparks, she played on the team that you know every single player went D1. Um, and so you know there were times where playing time you know was was tough. It was tough to get on that floor. And so, you know, I remember when we used to have those conversations, and you know, to this very day, I am impressed with her mindset about that in terms of, you know, you talk about different options, um, you know, we got the, you know, we can move to the other team. We could talk to you know, your coach about moving to the other team. Her thing was, no, I'm going to navigate myself through. I'm gonna get on the floor, and I'm gonna make something happen for myself. Um, sure enough, she did. Um, she found her niche. She was by far one of the best on ball defenders that I'd ever seen and ever coached. And that was her niche throughout college. So, um, you know, my kids were able to navigate through, the obstacles that were before them and come out on the other side. Um, you know, and it benefited them, moving into adulthood. So it was just a matter of me just staying in my place, um, being there when they needed me, but making sure that the journey was theirs.
So when you talk about Kayla, she's like an example of what I try to get a lot of kids to understand when we talk about being a defender
Hmm.
and being able to do the little things that coaches ask for. I never watched her play AAU with Sparks, but I watched multiple games when she was at Sarah, especially either her junior or sophomore year. But I remember she would come off the bench,
Hmm.
but she would come off the bench in big moments on big stages,
Hmm.
and she would lock up, make
Yep.
good decisions, hit down the open shots.
Hmm.
Kids don't realize, parents don't realize. It's more important to be able to do that in your little 3 minutes that you get
Right.
than to get out there for 20 minutes and you turning the ball over and doing all of this other stuff. That's one thing I'll never forget about Kayla. She was poised, she came
Yep.
in and she played her role
Right.
to the T.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I often use her as an example with with my parents and players today, in terms of what you just mentioned, in a little 2, 3 minutes, whatever, she would, make an impact. Um, you know, when when we were in Vegas, um, Washington State came out to see her play. Um, and she got into the game maybe about um, maybe about 6, 7 minutes left in the half, and she played a good 4 or 5 minutes. She was back out. I remember at halftime, Washington State coach got up and walked out, um, and before the halftime was over, um, our director, Elbert, rest in peace. Um, he had came over and he indicated that she had gotten a scholarship offer from Washington State. So I give people that example all the time. She came in, she played good hard nosed defense. She got a couple of steals, got a couple of layups out of it, just playing her role. Um, you know, uh, like you mentioned earlier, like parents think that they got to put together a whole mixtape, and kids have to score, 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 to make something happen and get a scholarship. It's just not the case. So I use her as an example often in terms of, good hard nose, going hard, sprinting up and down the court, just working hard. You know what I mean? Being um, team oriented, not out for self, so most definitely you got a great point there.
So, what sacrifices do families rarely talk about when pursuing athletic opportunities?
Um, I think one of the obvious ones is, family time, family vacations, um, the money and time invested. Because, let's face it, we're working off of blind faith when it comes down to the monetary investment, um, and not being able to see that light down at the end of the tunnel as of yet. But just, you know, sticking with the program. Um, um, uh, when I was still coaching the Inglewood Gym Rats, my daughters were playing travel ball. when they were younger, and my wife would we would always have to divide what we call divide and conquer. If we had tournaments at the same time, my wife would have to handle our daughters, while I was dealing with my son and the gym rats. Um, when you know funny quick story in terms of how I migrated over from the boys side to the girls side. And actually before that, whenever, you know, with the gym rats, our season enders would always be in Las Vegas. And, my daughters had to sacrifice big time in regard to that because both of their birthdays are in July. So, when we would go to tournaments, out in Vegas during the month of July, their birthday was always in Vegas. So they never had a regular, they can, they never, very rarely rather, they got to experience, your regular birthday parties, things like that. We would have to, do some type of makeshift, you know, um, you know, take them to the bowling alley, circus, things like that. So, they had to sacrifice. And, a quick story, how I migrated from the boys to the girls, is that my daughter Kayla, um, sixth grade, end of her sixth grade season, she sort of confronted me on how all my sacrifices was for Cameron and the gym rats. And, so funny, she had, there were a couple of times where she actually played with the boys, in some tournaments. And so she made me make a promise that, once the season was over, that I would come over to the girls' side and start coaching her. Um, and
All
she
right,
helped.
Kayla.
Yes, yes, she did. She confronted me in front of my in-laws. It was like she was like letting me have it, like a grown woman. Yeah, she was. She was. So, so I migrated over. Matter of fact, after that last tournament, she asked for my phone. Um, Gave her my phone, and she started going through you know, like the names of all of her, past teammates, whose parents she wanted me to call and get this going. And surely I did. I kid you not. I kid you not, Doc. So, that's how I got over to the girls' side. Started coaching her in the seventh grade. Seventh and eighth grade until we got over to the Cal Sparks. So, yeah, she confronted me on the sacrifices that she and her sister had to make,
Love it.
with this basketball stuff. So, and even with the wife, once the kids were done, with their high school careers, um, I was supposed to retire, but she ended up having to, she couldn't beat it, so she had to join it. So, oftentimes she's with me at tournaments, out of state tournaments and things like that. So it's definitely a sacrifice that a lot of people on the outside looking in don't know of. I even used to joke about with my parents that I was going to make them T-shirts that said "We are your weekend" because of the amount of sacrifice and the time that we took from them in terms of this in terms of this basketball stuff. So the sacrifice is significant.
So, how did your kids' experiences change your perspective as a coach?
Um, I think for me the biggest thing was opportunity. um like I said, in terms of their experiences, they thrived, and they performed when they were given the opportunity to do so. And so I keep that in mind when I'm coaching. Every game is an entirely different personality as far as I um, as the way I take it. And so, every kid deserves an opportunity. One kid, that might have a bad game today, uh, quite possibly can have a great game the following day. So it was never a situation for me where I had kids just sitting on the bench and didn't get an opportunity an entire game. It just wasn't my um, it wasn't my forte. It wasn't my style of doing things. Um, Especially um, watching my daughters, um, their journeys. So opportunity was big for me in terms of making sure everyone had that opportunity. And then, and you definitely, you take into consideration the, um, that investment that parents do make with this. And so, all that goes into um, every kid is, um, deserving a shot. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me. Making sure that every kid had an opportunity to perform on that big stage.
Yes, sir. So, where do parents often misinterpret success in youth sports?
Um, I think the end game. Um, I often I used to always say that a lot of parents focus on the wrong scoreboard, and what I mean by that is that for me, my job was to prepare my kids um, for life when the ball stops bouncing. When the ball stops bouncing is completely up to them. But when it did, um, you know, this basketball, and sports in general, I think such a s- you know a great resource for us and for our kids beyond the game, and making sure that they're prepared for life. I often, with every team that I coach, I always correlate, the game, sports in general, with real life. I make sure they understand that your coach is the equivalent of your supervisor or your boss. Your playing time is the equivalent of the money that you make. Making a team is the equivalent of you getting hired. Um, Decrease or increase in your playing time is sort of like your raise. And if and if your performance is such where you get cut, it's the equivalent of being fired. So um, and for me, that's what this whole the sports thing and the coaching is about. You know it's not the the the
Trophies.
score, right? Well, the scoreboard, the scoreboard in the gym, and how many points that your kid scored. You know what I mean? That's not the end game. You know what I mean? It's making sure that they know how to work with a team, such as they will have to do with their coworkers. You know,
Mhm.
um, becoming positive um, contributors to our society, being self sufficient, being able to communicate, being able to advocate for themselves. Those are, you know, that's what our role is. You know what I mean? And so that's as far as I think you know, the misinterpretation comes in. I think that end game. That's the end game for me. Not in terms of how many points that your kid scored, or how many offers I can get for your kid, or your kid receives. So I think that's the biggest you know, um, one of the biggest misinterpretations. Making sure that you develop the bridges and the relationships beyond the game. Um, the beautiful thing about what this game has given, for example, for Kayla. You know, you know, she's she's been able to, navigate, two master's degrees in terms of getting her original basketball scholarship from Washington State, and then, parlaying that into a grad assistant um, coaching job at the University of Laverne, where she was able to get her first master's. Then began teaching, jumped into a program where they paid for her second master's, and now she's looking to follow in your footsteps to get her PhD. So she get the doctor in front of that name. So all of that, came from these bridges developed through this game. That's the end game.
What's so funny, man, is like you, my whole reason of still doing sports, right? First of all, it gave me everything that I have now.
No doubt.
Um,
No doubt.
I never played college basketball,
Hmm.
which that was my foundation coming from a basketball family.
Right.
I played high school. I played JV my junior year, but I
Hmm.
started quarterback my junior year and varsity year, and or senior year. Went on to play some junior college football. Got incarcerated during that time,
Hmm.
and you fast forwarded to my kids during that time, and I mentioned this in the intro to my podcast. My girls were 4 and 2 when I decided to get off the streets.
Right.
Um, I started coaching, at the park.
Right.
Next thing you know, I'm working at a school.
Right.
All of this was because I was coaching sports,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So when we talk about what you just said, a lot of times I'm telling kids like, or their parents sometimes, the sport shouldn't be played because you want a scholarship or you want to go pro. Because if that's your only reason, then you're going to miss so many other opportunities and doors that are opening up to you that you don't see because you got
Absolutely.
these
Blinders on.
blinders on the side of
Absolutely.
you.
Yep.
But the
Absolutely.
relationships
Yep.
are crazy. You never
Yes, sir.
know what coach, what teammate,
Yep. Yep.
what person working the door, referee,
Absolutely.
all of these people, relationships are everything.
Absolutely. And it's just following the same blueprint that, my mom had put in place for me. I played at Derby. I played at Rogers. I played at Centinela Park, which is now, Vincent Park. You know, my mom, uh, um, put me in private schools. I went to Sayre, so my kids graduated from the same high school as I did. You
Mhm.
know, I ended up, and I think one of the, like this thing about having to play Division 1. I played Division 3 basketball at Whittier College. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. I learned how to communicate with people beyond my own race. Um, you know, my my school counselor is the one that got me my job that I hold today. Division 3 schools. One of the best things about Division 3 schools is that they're they're about that education, and they're about that, getting you beyond, you know um, that whole basketball or that whole sports thing. Sports is just part of the it's just part of that, you know, part of that process. You know what I mean? So, but those bridges are the most important thing, man. Even with my youngest one, developing, some of these bridges. She's trying to get into the fire department. You know, and you know, uh, a couple of people that I graduated from high school with, and I played ball with, are her mentors. One is a battalion chief. Him and his brother are, higher ups in the fire department. Um, one of my kids, one of the kids that one of the young ladies now that I used to coach, her father and his brothers were also in the fire department. So they stand, they're available to her. So those are the important things. That's that end game, and that's kind of got to look beyond what you can see on the basketball court, in terms of, really, squeezing that lemon dry in terms of trying to get every dropout, so very important.
Yeah, what I say is, you know, don't let the sport use you. You use the sport, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what that means to me when I say that is that if when the balls stop bouncing, you got nothing out of it, then the sport used you.
Absolutely. Big time. Big time. Agreed. 100%.
So, last question. There's just one piece of advice you can give to parents raising their kids in youth sports. What would it be?
Um, I think the most important thing for me and what I learned through this journey is that there's a difference between coaching and parenting. Um, you know, you coach, when your kid is on the field or on the court. Whether you are a direct coach or whether you're coaching from the stands, whatever the case is. Um, but when the game is over, it's the most important thing is to put that down and be a parent again. Um, you know, um, that whole thing. One of the things that before I learned how to do that, um, um, one of the things that was great about my wife, she was a buffer.
Sorry, I lost big bro, Coach Will. Um, where he stopped at was how his wife was the buffer at the end of games. So basically, what he was saying was that after the games, doing those rides home, she made sure that the conversations were no longer about basketball and they were back into their family lives. My biggest takeaway today was about the relationships he talked about. Being able to have relationships, establish those relationships, whether it's parent to child, coach to child, etc. That's very important when trying to raise our kids, making sure we have those relationships with them. Do me a favor, if this podcast is having any kind of impact, you're getting any kind of advice that you think is good, please like and comment at the bottom and subscribe. You all enjoy your week, and we'll catch you back next Saturday.